I'm Jeff Plantilla, and I'm going to give a special lecture on human rights for sustainable development. This presentation clarifies the basic concepts of human rights and development. It also discusses how human rights support sustainable development. The first thing is, what's the problem? What's the issue? We still have 16 major global problems to face, as you can see in social development goals, from poverty to hunger to health, education, gender equality, and a host of other issues. In 1969, the international community declared a grave food crisis afflicting the peoples of the developing countries where most of the world's hungry and ill-nourished live, and where more than 2/3 of the world's population produce about 1/3 of the world's food. In 2015, you have the Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a response to these problems, which says that it wants to eradicate poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty. And it's considered to be the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. The Food and Agriculture Organization report of 2017 states that world hunger is on the rise. The estimated number of undernourished people increased from 777 million in 2015 to 850 million in 2016. It says further that there is more than enough food produced in the world to feed everyone, yet 815 million people go hungry. It further says that there is an increased number of violent conflicts, especially in countries already facing food insecurity, hitting rural communities the hardest and having a negative impact on food production and availability. Food security is not the only factor of getting rid of hunger, especially for children. You have to have other factors to consider. Women's educational level, resources allocated to national policies and programs for maternal, infant, and young child nutrition, access to clean water, basic sanitation, quality health services, lifestyle, food environment, and culture. It further says, overall, these recent estimates are a warning signal that the aim of a world without hunger and malnutrition by 2030 will be challenging. And accomplishing it will require sustained commitment and efforts to promote the adequate availability of and access to nutritious food. Now let's go back to 2030 Agenda. And what are the three main points? Several points. People, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Let's look at the 3 points. People. The global community said, we are determined to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and to ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a healthy environment. Prosperity. We are determined to ensure that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives, and that economic, social, and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. The 2030 Agenda basically is saying that we envisage a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, non-discrimination, and of respect for race, ethnicity, and cultural diversity, and of equal opportunity, permitting the full realization of human potential and contributing to shared prosperity. So now let's go to development. How do we define development? The United Nations agencies have been defining development in different ways from different perspectives. Let's take a look at some of them. For example, the UNICEF sees development or progress not in terms of military or economic strength, nor by the splendor of their capital cities and public buildings, but by the well-being of their peoples, by their levels of health, nutrition, and education, by their opportunities to earn a fair reward for their labors, by their ability to participate in the decisions that affect their lives, by the respect that is shown for their civil and political liberties, by the provision that is made for those who are vulnerable and disadvantaged. And finally, by the protection that is afforded to the growing minds and bodies of their children. Another definition. Development is a comprehensive economic, social, cultural, and political process which aims at the constant improvement of the well-being of the entire population and of all individuals on the basis of their active, free, and meaningful participation in development and in the fair distribution of benefits resulting therefrom. And now if you go to sustainable development, which is a new concept in a sense, because it talks of something new. The word sustainable has been added to this concept. It says it is an inclusive and people-centered, benefiting and involving all people, including youth and children. That's the kind of development that we want. It has three dimensions: economic, social, and environmental. Now, the objectives of sustainable development is poverty eradication, changing consumption and production patterns, protecting and managing the natural resource base for economic and social development, gaining access to such basic requirements as clean water, sanitation, adequate shelter, energy, healthcare, food security, and the protection of biodiversity. We also have to think of some considerations, major considerations. Women empowerment, plight of indigenous people, small island developing states, and the least developed countries. We also have to look at participation of the people. So we have to look at people's opportunities to influence their lives and future, participate in decision making, and voice their concerns. We also have to look at the broad alliance of people, governments, civil society, and private sector, all working together to secure the future we want for present and future generations. We have to look at gender equality and women's empowerment. We have to look at women's equal rights and their access and opportunities for participation and leadership in the economy, society, and political decision making. All these statements about development and sustainable development include human rights as essential element. Now let's go to human rights. What are human rights? To me, these are rights that we claim in order to live a humane life. They include protection of life and its sustenance by having adequate food, housing, education, health service, physical security, and other basic needs. They include protection of reputation, home, privacy. They include freedom to undertake activities, particularly those related to the family, community, workplace, and society. They include enjoyment of opportunities to take part in the governance of society, in the maintenance and development of culture, traditions, and arts, in the advancement of science and technology. They include care for those who are in disadvantaged or difficult situations or conditions due to age, sickness, disabilities, social status, and economic situation. They include protection from unjust treatment, oppression, exclusion, physical injury, including death, and any form of unlawful or unjustified limitation of freedoms. So what we see here is that all of these rights would need a system that would recognize and guarantee their enjoyment. And this includes effective government institutions and appropriate laws. Such system should facilitate the realization and protection of human rights. Take note of the word realization. And provide the means to remedy their violation. However, these human rights are not always enjoyed and protected because of long existing systems, beliefs, and structures in society, in addition to government and private sector activities that affect the enjoyment and the protection of human rights. According to the United Nations, human rights are founded on respect for the dignity and worth of its person. You have to start from the person. The person, each one, has dignity and worth. It's applied equally and without discrimination to all people. That's why it's called universal. It cannot be taken away except in specific situations. That's why they are inalienable. They cannot be enjoyed and realized in parts, but as a whole set. That's why we say human rights are indivisible, interrelated, and interdependent. So what are these rights specifically? Now you have a set of standards based on agreement among members of the international community that identify what human rights are. In 1946, the United Nations started by recognizing human rights as one of the pillars on which to build a world of peace, justice, and progress. 2 years later, after so much debate among different people from different countries and regions of the world, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations. Human rights are still to be realized, so we have to have something to work for together, common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations. Let me give you some basic principles that are in this UDHR. First, the concept of human being. Every human being is born free and equal in rights and dignity, and endowed with reason and conscience. To me, this is a definition of what a human being should be in terms of our ideas of a human being. Born free, equal in rights and dignity, and endowed with reason and conscience. Every human being is also expected to act towards other human beings in a spirit of brotherhood, or you may say sisterhood. Next, non-discrimination. All human beings enjoy all human rights, and they should not be restricted, they should not be stopped by race, color, sex, language, and all the other factors. What we have to emphasize is that everyone, all human beings, enjoy all human rights. Respect. This is a very important aspect of UDHR, which means respect for all human rights is expected from all human beings. Everyone has to respect other people's human rights. Realization. Human rights can be achieved through immediate and progressive measures by the state. The state can do whatever it can do now, but it can also do through progressive measures something more in the future. So we both cover what they can do and what they can do right now. About the individuals and the community, the individual is important, but meaningful exercise of rights happen in the context of the family, groups, community, and the whole society. Social and international context of rights fulfillment, we cannot fulfill our rights if our social and international contexts are against human rights. Therefore, everyone is entitled to a social and international order in order that the rights stated in the UDHR can be fully realized. The international standards of human rights have been set, and there are human rights being considered at the moment. But the exercise of rights may have limitations. And if ever such limitations exist, there are certain conditions to follow. Under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, such limitations must be determined by law. And such law must be solely for the purpose of the following: One, securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others. If you want human rights to be realized, you have to understand that everybody's rights must be realized as much as possible together at the same time. Therefore, we have to make sure that we don't discriminate against the rights of others. Second, it must meet the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. Of course, there will be question of what is morality, what is public order, and what is the general welfare. Also, what is democratic society. But more or less, we have a sense of making sure that limitations are based on these conditions. Another important point is about duty. Under the UDHR, the individual has duties, as is stated here. Everyone has duties to the community, in which alone the free and full development of his personality is possible. As stated earlier, we cannot imagine human rights to be realized, to be exercised, without the community, or without the group, without the family, outside of the workplace. Rights are exercised in the context of other people, and in this case, the community is our place where we can have a free and full development of our personality. But also, and even more important, is the duty of the state. It is the primary duty of the state to ensure that rights are protected, are promoted, and realized. And here the state would consist of government, legislature, and judiciary. And all of them will have to do whatever is necessary to protect, promote, and realize human rights. Here you can see a listing of the rights. Under the UDHR, you can say civil and political rights, you can say economic and social cultural rights. Civil and political rights like right to life, liberty, and security of person, right not to be enslaved, right not to be tortured or given cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law, right to equal protection of the law. Under the economic, social, cultural rights, you can have right to social security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond one's control. It also includes right to work, which means the right to free choice of employment. You choose the work that you want. Just and favorable conditions of work. Protection against unemployment. Equal pay for equal work. Just and favorable remuneration for work done. And also the right to form and join trade unions. The right to rest and leisure. So you can see, it's a long list of rights only in that document of the UDHR. Subsequent documents that came out of the UN also provide even more detailed examples, even more detailed discussion of these rights. And these are all rights that we have to enjoy, rights that we have to exercise, rights that are needed for our own development as well as the development of other people and of the whole society. So now let's go to the link between human rights and development. In 1969, in the Declaration on Social Progress and Development, there's a statement. Every man, woman, and child has the inalienable right to be free from hunger and malnutrition in order to develop fully and maintain their physical and mental faculties. Take note, inalienable right to be free from hunger and malnutrition. In 1974, an even broader statement says, all peoples and all human beings, without distinction as to race, color, sex, language, etc., shall have the right to live in dignity and freedom, and to enjoy the fruits of social progress, and also should on their part contribute to it. So they work for development, but they also benefit from development. In the same document in 1974, it says, social progress and development shall be founded on respect for the dignity and value of the human person. Dignity and value of the human person. That's a very important component. And shall ensure the promotion of human rights and social justice. The United Nations also has expressly declared the existence of a right to development. The United Nations Declaration on the Right to Development in 1986 states, the human person is the central subject of development. Development is for the human person. That's the point of development, and should be the active participant and beneficiary of the right to development. It is for the human person, and it's for the human person to take part in it. So it's both the subject and object of development. It also says that all human beings have a responsibility for development, individually and collectively. It's not a question only of waiting for development to happen, but for the person, the individuals, and everyone to take part in development, because it's also their responsibility. Taking into account the need for full respect for their human rights and fundamental freedoms. It also says, taking into consideration their duties to the community, in which alone can ensure the free and complete fulfillment of the human being. Just like what was mentioned before, we cannot take ourselves out of the community. It is there where we can have a fulfillment of our own personality, of our own human welfare. And they should therefore, these individuals and people, promote and protect an appropriate political, social, and economic order for development. Also the states, going back to the concept of duty of the state. States have the right and the duty to formulate appropriate national development policies that aim at the constant improvement of the well-being of the entire population and of all individuals. Take note, in constant improvement of the well-being of the entire population and of all individuals. We're not talking here of just a 10-year period, or maybe even 30-year period. We're talking here of constant improvement, depending on how far the states can develop, use the resources in order to push for the development. And not just of some people, but the entire population and all individuals. And that development must be on the basis of their the people's active, free, and meaningful participation in development, and in the fair distribution of the benefits resulting therefrom. We are talking here of inclusive development, non-discriminatory development, where people are themselves part of the development process. States should also encourage popular participation in all spheres as an important factor in development and in the full realization of all human rights. The states have to provide a mechanism to ensure that people can participate in all spheres of development. Now, we also have to understand, when we talk of development, we also talk of one factor, and that is the role of business. We cannot have development without business. Business is part of development, the total comprehensive notion of development. And the United Nations in 2011 decided to adopt these guiding principles on business and human rights. And they emphasize three major pillars. First, the duty of state to protect, the corporate responsibility to respect, and access to remedy. So let's go to the first pillar, the state duty to protect. Under the guiding principles, the states have the duty to protect against human rights abuses. Take note of the word abuses. This word is normally used when it comes to human rights that are not promoted, protected, or respected by entities other than the state. So here, we're basically talking of business enterprises. That's why this means states must prevent such abuses, must investigate if they occur, punish and redress human rights abuses that take place in domestic business operations. This is an important aspect of the human rights field in the sense that now the states are looking into the operations of business enterprises and looking at human rights abuses of these business enterprises. The corporate responsibility to respect. Here again, we are now focusing on business enterprises, that they have a role to play not only in development but also in human rights. Business enterprises must prevent, just like the state, any human rights abuses from occurring. Or, if they occur, mitigate and where appropriate, remedy such abuses. Now, the reason is because they are contributory to such abuses. That's why they have to ensure that such abuses are remedied, that people who are affected are given justice, that human rights are applied in terms of their situation. Access to remedy. The principle is simply, when a right is violated, victims must have access to an effective remedy. In this case, the state should provide the mechanisms to ensure that people whose rights are violated can get their rights remedied or their problems remedied. In the same way, business enterprises must have the mechanisms, the systems, the policies to ensure that the rights of their workers or the people that are affected by their business operations have access to effective remedy in case their rights have been abused by business operations. Now let me then summarize the main points that I've been trying to point out in the relationship between development and human rights. What are those points that have been coming out through all these years in the different United Nations declarations, in the different United Nations documents? There are several points. Number one, constant improvement of the well-being of the entire population and of all individuals. Development must aim at this point. Improvement of the well-being, not only of some people, but the entire population and all individuals. Two, participation in the process of development. Development cannot be done only by some. It must be done by everyone, including those who are going to benefit from development. Third, such development must result in the enjoyment of the benefits of development. It's not only a question of participation, it's a question of being part of the enjoyment of benefits. Fourth, the enjoyment of all human rights and access to remedy. You cannot have development without human rights. And you cannot have human rights without relating to development. Human rights relate to many things that development is concerned about. Therefore, there must be enjoyment of all human rights to be able to participate and enjoy the benefits of development. And in case problems have occurred, there must be access to effective remedy.